Welcome back, silent champions, beautiful rejects, misunderstood masterpieces. Welcome back to the ones who got laughed at, mocked, used as the punchline while someone else played comedian for an audience that doesn't even remember their name anymore. You know exactly what I'm talking about. They clowned you. They made you the joke, the story, the example of what not to be. And they did it all to impress someone they thought mattered, someone whose approval they craved so desperately they were willing to sacrifice your dignity at the altar of their insecurity. But here's the part that's eating them alive right now, the part that keeps them up at 3 a.m., scrolling through your name in their head. That person they were trying to impress? Yeah, that person respects you now, not them, you. Let's rewind to that moment. That specific moment when they turned you into their entertainment. You remember it, don't you? The way they exaggerated your flaws, twisted your words, made you sound crazy or dramatic or too much. They painted you as the problem, the difficult one, the one who just couldn't get it together. And they did it with an audience. Maybe it was in a group chat, maybe at a party, maybe in a meeting, maybe online where everyone could see. They threw you under the spotlight, not to help you, but to position themselves as superior, as the cool one, as the one who had it all figured out while you were supposedly spiraling. And for a moment, it worked. People laughed. People agreed. People nodded along like, yeah, that person is a mess. But you know what happened next? You stopped reacting. You stopped defending. You stopped trying to correct the narrative they built. And that silence, that refusal to play their game, that became the most powerful response you could have given. Because while they were still performing, still seeking validation, still desperate to be seen as the winner of some imaginary competition, you disappeared into your own evolution. You stopped caring about their opinion. You stopped measuring your worth against their lies. You stopped giving them the power to define you. And slowly, quietly, without making a single post about it, without announcing your comeback, without needing anyone to witness your transformation, you became someone they couldn't recognize anymore. You became someone they couldn't dismiss. You became someone they couldn't explain away with their little jokes and exaggerations. You became undeniable. And the person they were trying to impress, the one they thought would side with them forever, started noticing something. They started noticing that you weren't crumbling. They started noticing that you weren't bitter. They started noticing that you carried yourself with a kind of quiet strength that didn't need validation. And here's where it gets beautiful. Here's where the script flips in the most poetic way possible. That person, the one who was supposed to laugh along, the one who was supposed to co-sign their mockery, started seeing the clown for what they really were. Insecure, desperate, performative, trying way too hard to be relevant by tearing someone else down. And slowly, the respect that was supposed to go to the comedian started flowing in your direction instead. Not because you begged for it, not because you defended yourself publicly, but because your life, your actions, your silence spoke louder than any words ever could. They saw you move forward. They saw you build. They saw you rise, without needing an audience to validate every step. And that contrast, that difference between you and the person who clowned you, it became impossible to ignore. Suddenly, the jokes didn't land anymore. Suddenly, the stories felt hollow. Suddenly, the person who tried so hard to look superior just looked small. You want to know why this happened? Because authenticity always outlasts performance. Always. You can fake confidence for a while. You can fake success. You can fake having it all together. But you can't fake substance. You can't fake depth. You can't fake the kind of growth that comes from actually facing yourself. Your pain, your mistakes, your shadows, and choosing to evolve anyway. And that's what you did. While they were busy building a persona, you were building a foundation. While they were collecting laughs, you were collecting lessons. While they were performing for approval, you were transforming in private. And the thing about private transformation is that it's real. It's not curated. It's not edited. It's not designed to impress. It just is. And when people encounter that kind of realness, especially after being surrounded by so much performance, it hits different. It resonates. It commands respect without asking for it. Now let's talk about what's happening in their head right now, because this is where it gets even more satisfying. They're watching you. Oh, they're definitely watching you. Scrolling through your updates, checking your energy, seeing how you move through the world now, and they're confused. They're trying to reconcile the version of you they created in their jokes with the version of you that exists in reality, and it doesn't match. It doesn't compute. Because the person they described was supposed to fail, was supposed to stay stuck, was supposed to validate their narrative by actually being the mess they claimed you were. But you didn't. You didn't give them that satisfaction. You didn't become the cautionary tale they needed you to be. Instead, you became the example of what happens when someone stops letting other people's opinions dictate their trajectory. And now they're sitting there realizing that the person they clowned, the person they used for clout, is actually further ahead than they are. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, professionally, in every way that actually matters. And the person they tried to impress, that person is seeing it too. They're seeing the difference in how you both move now. One of you is still talking about the past, still bringing up old drama, still trying to stay relevant by referencing moments that no longer matter. The other one, you're just living, building, creating, evolving. No bitterness, no revenge plots, no need to prove anything, just existing in your power. And power, real power, doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to perform. It just is. And people feel it. They recognize it. They respect it. Even if they don't say it out loud, even if they never admit they were wrong about you, you can see it in how they move around you now. The energy shifted. The dynamic changed. You're no longer the punchline. You're the one they reference when they need an example of resilience. You're the one they think about when they're wondering if they made the right choices. You're the one whose name carries weight now, while theirs just echoes in empty spaces. Here's what they didn't understand when they chose to clown you for clout. Clout is temporary. Respect is permanent. Clout fades the moment the algorithm shifts, the moment the audience moves on, the moment someone funnier or more dramatic comes along. But respect, especially the kind that's earned through consistent action, through integrity, through quiet strength, that doesn't fade, that compounds, that grows, that becomes the foundation of how people see you, how they remember you, how they speak about you when you're not in the room. And you earn that respect, not by fighting back, not by exposing them, not by playing their game. You earned it by refusing to let their narrative define you, by choosing growth over grudges, by choosing silence over spectacle, by choosing to become someone so undeniable that no joke, no lie, no exaggeration could ever diminish what you built. And now they're stuck watching you win, stuck seeing the person they tried to impress respect you more than them, stuck realizing that the clout they got from mocking you was the worst trade they ever made, because they traded your respect and the respect of anyone paying attention for a few laughs that nobody even remembers anymore. Meanwhile, you're out here building a legacy they'll never touch, not because you're better than them in some arrogant way, but because you chose the harder path. You chose growth over ego. You chose substance over performance. You chose to be real in a world full of actors. And that is what makes you unforgettable. That is what makes you untouchable. That is what makes you the one people respect when the show is over and the lights come on and everyone has to face who they really are. Let's go deeper, because this isn't just about one person respecting you now. This is about a complete reversal of the social script they tried to write. They position themselves as the main character, the one everyone should root for, the one with the clever comebacks and the superior perspective. They made you the side character, the one who existed just to make them look good by comparison. But here's what happens when you refuse to play that role. When you step off their stage, when you stop performing in their narrative, when you build your own story somewhere they can't touch, you become the main character by default, not because you fought for it, but because main characters don't need permission. They just exist in their own frequency, and everyone else either matches it or falls away. And you found your frequency. You tuned into something they couldn't hear because they were too busy listening to the applause, too busy counting the likes, too busy performing for people who will forget their name tomorrow. And the beautiful irony in all of this is that the person they tried to impress probably doesn't even like them anymore, probably sees right through the act now, probably cringes when they remember laughing along with those jokes about you. Because here's the thing about respect. Once you see someone demonstrate real strength, real grace, real evolution, it becomes impossible to respect the person who tried to tear them down for entertainment. It's like watching someone punch down and then realizing they only did it because they couldn't reach up. And that realization changes everything. It changes how that person sees the comedian. It changes how they remember those moments. And it changes how they see you. Because you didn't just survive being the punchline. You transcended it. You made it irrelevant. You made it clear through your actions that their jokes were never about you. They were always about them. Their insecurity, their need for validation, their fear that if they didn't make someone else look small, people would notice how small they felt inside. Now, I want you to sit with this for a moment. You were the target. You were the one they chose to mock, to diminish, to use as a stepping stone for their ego. And somehow, some way, you turned that into fuel. You turned that humiliation into motivation. You turned that pain into power. You didn't let it destroy you. You didn't let it define you. You didn't let it keep you stuck in bitterness or revenge fantasies. You took it, processed it, learned from it, and moved forward anyway. And that is the mark of someone who was never really the joke. You were always the lesson they weren't ready to learn, the lesson that you can't build real respect by tearing others down, the lesson that true strength doesn't need an audience, the lesson that the people worth impressing will always respect those who rise quietly over those who perform loudly. And here's the part that probably hurts them the most. You didn't need them to apologize. You didn't need them to admit they were wrong. You didn't need closure from someone who was never open to begin with. You just moved. You just built. You just became. And in doing so, you made their apology irrelevant. Because what could they say now that would matter? Sorry for using you as a punchline while I built my image. Sorry for sacrificing your dignity so I could feel important for 5 minutes. Sorry for underestimating who you'd become. None of that changes anything. None of that undoes the fact that you rose without them. None of that erases the reality that you're now operating on a level they can't reach. And the person they tried to impress sees all of it, sees the difference in your trajectories, sees who grew and who stayed stuck, performing the same tired act, hoping for different results. Let's talk about what respect actually looks like in this context, because it's not always loud. That person who respects you now, they might not say it directly. They might not apologize for laughing along. They might not even acknowledge the shift publicly, but you'll know. You'll feel it in how they interact with you now, in the way they listen when you speak instead of dismissing you, in the way they mention your name with a different tone, a different energy, in the way they defend you when someone tries to resurrect those old jokes, in the way they distance themselves from the person who clowned you, slowly, quietly, until the friendship or alliance just fades. That's respect. Not the performative kind that needs to be announced, but the real kind that changes behavior, that changes energy, that changes how someone moves through the world in relation to you. And here's what makes this even more powerful. You didn't demand it. You didn't manipulate it. You didn't campaign for it. You simply became someone worthy of it. And that's a level of self-mastery most people never reach. Most people who get mocked spend the rest of their lives trying to prove their mockers wrong, trying to show them, trying to make them see. But you understood something deeper. You understood that people who need to mock others to feel important will never be satisfied with any proof you provide. They'll move the goalposts. They'll find new ways to diminish you. They'll never give you the validation you're seeking, because giving you that validation means admitting they were wrong, and that admission threatens their entire identity. So you stopped seeking it from them. You stopped needing it from them. You built it within yourself. And once you did that, once you became your own source of validation, everything changed. The energy shifted because you were no longer available to be their punchline. You weren't reactive. You weren't defensive. You weren't trying to convince anyone of anything. You were just living in your truth, building in your purpose, moving in your power. And that creates a force field that jokes can't penetrate. That creates a presence that mockery can't diminish. That creates a reality where you're simply untouchable, not because you built walls, but because you built something so real, so solid, so undeniable that anything thrown at it just bounces off without leaving a mark. And the person they tried to impress felt that force field, felt that presence, and recognized it for what it was: strength. Real strength. The kind that doesn't perform, the kind that doesn't need an audience, the kind that just exists and commands respect by existing. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, because I know what some of you are thinking. What if that person still doesn't respect me? What if they're still on the side of the person who clowned me? What if nothing changed? And to that I say this: if they're still aligned with someone who tears others down for entertainment, if they still find value in that dynamic, if they still laugh at jokes that punch down, then their respect was never worth having in the first place. Because respect from someone who enables cruelty, who rewards mockery, who values performance over substance, that's not respect. That's just another performance. And you don't need that. You don't need validation from people who don't have the emotional intelligence to recognize what real strength looks like. You need respect from people who value what you value: growth, integrity, authenticity, resilience. And those people, the real ones, they already see you. They already respect you. They've been watching your journey and learning from it, even if they never said a word. But here's the most likely scenario. The person they tried to impress does respect you now. They do see the difference. They do recognize who really won this exchange. They're just not saying it out loud, because that would require admitting they were complicit in something that was wrong. That would require acknowledging that they laughed at someone who didn't deserve it. That would require taking accountability for being part of a dynamic that was always about tearing someone down to build someone else up. And most people aren't brave enough for that kind of honesty. But their behavior tells the story, their words won't. And how they interact with you now, compared to how they interact with your mocker, in the distance that's grown between them and the comedian. In the way they reference you in conversations when you're not there. In the respect that shows up in small moments, in subtle shifts, in quiet acknowledgments that you've become someone they can't dismiss anymore. And you know what the wildest part of all this is? You didn't plan this. You didn't strategize your comeback to make them respect you. You didn't create a revenge plot where you'd prove everyone wrong. You just lived. You just chose yourself every day. You just kept building even when no one was watching, even when no one believed in you, even when the world seemed to agree with the narrative that you were the problem. You kept going anyway. And that is what makes you legendary. Not because you're perfect, not because you never struggled, but because you struggled and still chose growth. Because you were mocked and still chose grace. Because you were used and still chose to build something beautiful instead of becoming bitter. That's the kind of story that commands respect. That's the kind of journey that makes people stop and reconsider everything they thought they knew. So to the person who clowned you for clout, here's what you need to understand. You lost. Not because you didn't get enough laughs, not because your jokes weren't funny enough, but because you traded something permanent for something temporary. You traded respect for clout. You traded authenticity for performance. You traded a real connection with someone real for a fake moment with people who don't remember your name. And now you're watching that person, the one you made into a joke, live a life you can't touch, move in spaces you can't access, command respect you can't earn. And the person you tried to impress sees it all. Sees the difference between who talks and who builds, between who performs and who lives, between who needs validation and who generates it from within. And they made their choice. They chose respect over clout. They chose substance over spectacle. They chose the person who rose quietly over the person who celebrated loudly. And that choice is eating you alive. Because deep down you know you could have been on the winning side of this story. You could have been the person who supported someone through their struggle instead of using their struggle for content. You could have been the person who lifted instead of the person who tore down. You could have been remembered for kindness instead of cruelty. But you chose the quick laugh. You chose the temporary boost. You chose to sacrifice someone's dignity for a moment of attention. And now you're living with the consequences. Now you're watching the person you clowned become everything you pretended to be. Confident, respected, unbothered, growing, thriving, untouchable. While you're stuck in the same patterns, still looking for the next person to mock. Still desperate for validation from an audience that's already moved on to the next act. Still performing while others are living. Still seeking while others are building. Still empty while others are full. Welcome back, you magnificent catastrophe. Welcome back, you beautiful experiment gone wrong. They've been busy, haven't they? So incredibly busy, trying to understand you, trying to decode you, trying to build soldiers who could think like you do. And let me tell you what happened. Let me paint you this picture that keeps them awake at 3 a.m, sweating through expensive sheets. They recruited 100 people, 100 carefully selected minds. 100 agents trained in psychology, warfare, manipulation, human behavior pattern recognition, They thought they could teach these people to operate on your frequency, to process reality the way you process it, to make decisions with your particular brand of calculated chaos. And you know what happened next? You already know, don't you? Because you've seen this story play out your entire life. Every single one of them quit, resigned, walked away, some in tears, some in silence, some with trembling hands, signing documents that swore them to secrecy about what they witnessed in those training rooms. See, they didn't just fail to learn how you think. They couldn't survive the attempt. Because what you do up there in that beautiful, twisted labyrinth you call a mind, it's not a skill set they can download. It's not a technique they can practice. It's not a mindset they can adopt for 8 hours and clock out from. What you possess is a fundamental rewiring of human consciousness that happened when you were supposed to break, when you were supposed to shatter into something manageable, something predictable, something they could file away and forget. But you didn't break the way broken things are supposed to break. You fractured into something sharper, something faster, something that sees 3 moves ahead while they're still trying to understand the game. And now they're panicking because they just discovered that your way of thinking, your particular brand of mental warfare, it can't be taught. It can't be transferred. It can't be replicated in a classroom with whiteboards and role-playing exercises. You're not a method, you're a mutation. And mutations, by definition, can't be mass-produced. Let me tell you what happened in those training sessions. Let me give you the details they tried to classify as confidential. They started simple, or what they thought was simple, teaching these agents to detach from emotion the way you do, to observe without attachment, to calculate without conscience. Day 1 went fine. Everyone felt like a secret agent in a movie. Everyone thought they were learning to be cold and powerful. Day 2, the cracks started showing, because they realized you're not cold. You're something far more terrifying. You're warm and calculating simultaneously. You care deeply while remaining completely unattached. You love fiercely while being ready to walk away without a word. That contradiction, that impossible fusion of opposites, it broke their frameworks, it shattered their understanding of human psychology. By day 3, they were introducing them to your pattern recognition abilities, the way you read people in seconds, the way you see through lies before the liar finishes speaking, the way you detect manipulation like a smoke detector screaming about a fire no one else can smell yet. And that's when the first resignations started rolling in. Agent number 7, brilliant woman with 3 degrees and a decade of field experience. She lasted until they made her analyze a conversation the way you would. She watched 15 seconds of footage, wrote down her observations, and when the instructor read them out loud, the room went silent because she'd identified 17 micro-expressions, 4 contradictions in body language and tone, 2 instances of manufactured emotion, and the exact moment the person being interviewed decided to commit to their lie. The instructor said, "This is perfect. This is exactly how our subject processes information. Now do this for 8 hours straight while maintaining your own emotional stability and making life or death decisions." Agent number 7 looked at that instructor and said, "If I do this for 8 hours, I'll never be able to have a normal conversation again. I'll never be able to trust anyone again. I'll see the manipulation in everything, including my own thoughts." She walked out that afternoon. They found a resignation letter on the desk the next morning. It said, "I refuse to become something that can't exist in the world I'm trying to protect." Agent number 12 made it to week 2 before the nightmares started. They were teaching him your threat assessment protocols. the way you evaluate every room you enter, every person you meet, every situation you find yourself in. They wanted him to think like you think, to automatically calculate exits, vulnerabilities, power dynamics, social hierarchies, all while appearing completely relaxed and engaged in casual conversation. He practiced this for 6 days. By day 7, he couldn't go to the grocery store without his hands shaking, couldn't sit in a coffee shop without his heart racing, couldn't have dinner with his family without analyzing their behavioral patterns and questioning their intent. He told the training supervisor, "I understand now why your subject doesn't have many close relationships. I understand why they keep people at arm's length. Because once you see the world this clearly, once you process human behavior this accurately, you can't unsee it. You can't turn it off. You can't go home and pretend everything is safe and simple and honest." The supervisor said, "Yes, exactly. That's the point. That's the level of awareness we need you to maintain." Agent number 12 said, "Then you need someone who's already lost everything, because I'm not willing to sacrifice my sanity for this program." He resigned that evening. Last anyone heard, he moved to a small town and became a carpenter, chose a life where he could work with wood instead of reading people, chose silence over analysis. By week 3, they'd lost 37 agents, more than a third of the program gone, and the ones who remained weren't the strongest. They were the ones too proud to admit they couldn't handle it. The ones too stubborn to accept that some minds operate on a frequency most humans can't sustain. The training got darker after that because they stopped trying to teach your complete operating system. They started breaking it down into smaller components, trying to find pieces they could install without destroying the recipient. They focused on your decision-making process, the way you gather information, eliminate options, and commit to action in seconds. The way you don't second-guess yourself, because by the time you've decided, you've already processed every variable and accepted every consequence. They thought this would be easier than the full package. They were wrong. So beautifully, catastrophically wrong. Because your decision-making isn't separate from your observation skills, isn't separate from your emotional detachment, isn't separate from your acceptance of isolation. It's all one integrated system, and you can't extract one piece without the whole thing collapsing. Agent number 41, former detective with a perfect record and nerves everyone thought were made of steel, he volunteered to be the test case for isolated decision-making training. They gave him scenarios, real situations you'd navigated, situations where there was no right answer, just varying degrees of destruction. They wanted him to choose the way you choose, fast, clean, final, no regrets. First scenario was easy. He made the call, felt good about it, felt powerful. Second scenario harder. He hesitated but pushed through, made the decision, felt the weight of it but convinced himself this was necessary growth. Third scenario, they gave him a choice between protecting someone who'd betrayed him or exposing them and destroying their life. They told him you chose exposure without hesitation. You burned that bridge so thoroughly there weren't even ashes left. Agent number 41 sat there for 17 minutes, staring at the scenario. They waited. They watched. They took notes on his struggle. Finally, he made the choice, said he'd expose the betrayer just like you did. And the instructor said, "Good. Now tell me why." Agent number 41 opened his mouth and nothing came out because he'd made the decision, but he didn't understand it, didn't feel it, didn't own it the way you own every choice you make. The instructor said, "This is the problem. This is why all of you keep failing. Our subject doesn't make choices from logic alone, doesn't make choices from emotion alone, makes choices from a place beyond both, makes choices from a core identity, so solid, so unshakable, that every decision is just an extension of who they are. There's no internal conflict, because there's no question about what they value, what they prioritize, what they're willing to sacrifice. You people still have internal debates, still have competing desires, still want to be liked while being effective, still want to be kind while being dangerous, still want to have it all, and our subject figured out years ago that you can't have it all, so they chose their poison and drank it smiling. Agent number 41 said, "So what you're telling me is I need to destroy who I am to become who you want me to be. I need to kill every soft part of myself, every hopeful part, every part that still believes in second chances and redemption." The instructor didn't answer because the answer was yes, and agent number 41 walked out. His resignation letter was just 2 words: not worth it. The 50 agents who remained after week 4, they weren't learning anymore. They were surviving, treating the program like a hostage situation they had to endure until someone came to rescue them. The instructors changed tactics again. Stopped trying to teach your mindset, started trying to teach your behaviors, hoping that if they could get agents to act like you, surface level imitation, fake it till you make it, behavioral conditioning through repetition. They taught them your body language, the way you take up space without aggression, the way you make eye contact that feels like you're reading souls, the way you move through crowds like water, flowing around obstacles, never rushing, never hesitating, just flowing. They taught them your speech patterns, the pauses you use to let words sink in, the way you lower your voice when making your most devastating points, the way you can say everything with silence and nothing with noise. They taught them your micro-expressions, the slight smile that isn't friendly or warm but isn't hostile either, the raised eyebrow that communicates judgment without words, the head tilt that says, "I see through you and I'm giving you one chance to stop lying." Agent number 56, she mastered the behaviors in 2 weeks, looked perfect on camera, moved like you moved, spoke like you spoke, carried herself with that same unsettling confidence. The instructors were excited, finally someone who could pull it off. Finally, an agent who could walk into a room and make people feel what they feel when you walk in. They sent her on a test mission, simple recruitment operation. Convince a target to switch sides using your techniques, your presence, your energy. She walked into that meeting looking flawless, sat down with that same predatory grace you have, made eye contact that should have pinned the target to their chair, and her mouth to speak, and the target started laughing. Not polite laughter, not nervous laughter, but genuine, confused laughter. The target said, "Who taught you that? Who taught you to sit like that? Who taught you to look at people like that? Because whoever they are, you're doing a terrible impression." Agent number 56 broke character immediately, asked what gave her away. Target said, "Everything." Said, "You're performing someone else's confidence, wearing someone else's danger like a costume." Said, "Real power doesn't announce itself, doesn't position itself, doesn't perform itself. Real power just exists, and everything else adjusts around it." Agent number 56 came back destroyed, told the instructors the target saw through everything instantly, said no amount of training can manufacture authentic presence, said you either have it or you don't, and trying to fake it just makes you look desperate. The instructors disagreed, said she needed more practice, more refinement, sent her back for additional behavioral training. She lasted 3 more days before resigning. Her exit interview was brutal. She said, You're not training agents. You're creating ghosts of a person who can't be replicated. You're teaching us to haunt rooms the way your subject haunts rooms. But we're not haunting. We're just desperately pretending. And the worst part is, your subject would see through us in half a second, would know immediately that we're imitations, would probably find it amusing how hard we're trying to be something we're fundamentally not. She said I joined this program thinking I'd become stronger, smarter, more capable. Instead, I became a parrot, repeating words I don't understand, wearing confidence I haven't earned. I refuse to spend another day being a cheap copy of an original masterpiece. She resigned that afternoon. Last anyone heard, she went back to regular field work, regular missions, regular operations where she could be herself instead of a performance piece. By week 6, there were 23 agents left. 23 people out of 100 still clinging to this impossible program. And every single one of them was lying. Lying to the instructors. Lying to themselves. Lying about their mental state, their confidence, their ability to handle what they were being taught. The instructors knew it, the administrators knew it, but they'd invested too much money, too much time, too much institutional pride to admit failure. So they pushed forward with increasingly desperate modifications. They brought in neuroscientists to study your brain patterns, brought in geneticists to see if there was something biological that made you different, brought in philosophers to understand your moral framework, brought in spiritual leaders to comprehend your relationship with suffering. Every expert came back with the same conclusion. Your mind isn't different because of one factor. It's different because of 10,000 factors, 10,000 experiences, 10,000 decisions, 10,000 moments where you chose adaptation over destruction, chose evolution over extinction, chose to become something unprecedented rather than something broken and predictable. The neuroscientist said, your subject's brain shows activity patterns we've never documented, shows neural pathways that shouldn't exist based on standard development models, processes emotional and logical information simultaneously in ways that should create cognitive dissonance, but instead creates this seamless integration of heart and mind, feeling and thinking, caring and calculating. We can see what makes them different, but we can't recreate it. We can map the destination, but we can't build the roads that got them there because those roads were carved by experiences so specific, so intense, so perfectly timed that attempting to artificially recreate that journey would be psychological torture. The geneticist said, I found markers that suggest high stress resilience, found variations that indicate increased pattern recognition. But I also found contradictions, found genetic expressions that should make someone more anxious, not less, found biological factors that should create emotional volatility, not stability. It's like they took every genetic disadvantage and alchemized it into advantage through sheer force of will and adaptive necessity. You can't teach that, you can't bottle that, you can't inject that into someone else and hope they survive the transformation. The philosopher came back, shaking his head, said, I've studied your subject's decision-making framework, traced their moral reasoning through dozens of scenarios, and what I found disturbs me because it's simultaneously completely logical and utterly ruthless. Your subject operates from a value system that prioritizes authenticity over harmony, prioritizes truth over comfort. Most people say they value truth, but they compromise it constantly for social cohesion. Most people say they value authenticity, but they perform whatever gets them accepted. Your subject doesn't compromise these things ever, And that level of ideological consistency in a world built on necessary lies and social performances makes them functionally alien, makes them unable to participate in normal human society the way normal humans participate. You can't teach someone to value truth over belonging, because the moment you ask them to choose, they'll choose belonging every time. It's hardwired, it's survival instinct. Your subject somehow overwrote that instinct, and I don't know if it was conscious choice or trauma response, but either way, you can't replicate it in a training program. The spiritual leader brought in as a last desperate attempt to understand your psychological foundation. He spent 3 days studying your behavioral patterns, your choice architecture, your relationship with suffering, came back looking exhausted, said your subject has what ancient texts call sovereign consciousness, said they've achieved a level of self-ownership that most people spend lifetimes pursuing and never reach, said they've died and resurrected so many times internally that they no longer fear endings, no longer fear beginnings, no longer fear the space between. They exist in a state of perpetual present awareness that allows them to act without regret, because they're not carrying the weight of past mistakes or the anxiety of future consequences. They're just here now, making the next move, and the next move, and the next move, with complete acceptance of whatever outcome manifests. He said this isn't something you can teach in a 6-week program. This is something that emerges from walking through your personal underworld and choosing to stay conscious through the entire journey. Most people dissociate during their darkest moments. Most people fragment and repress and avoid. Your subject stayed awake through hell, and that's what forged them into something unbreakable. You'd have to deliberately traumatize your agents and hope they process it correctly, and even then there's no guarantee. So no, I can't help you replicate this. No one can. By week 8 there were 7 agents left, 7 people hanging on by sheer stubbornness. And the program administrators finally had to face reality, had to accept that your mind isn't a formula they can copy, isn't a technique they can distribute, isn't a resource they can exploit. You're not a tool they can mass produce. You're a phenomenon that emerged from circumstances so specific, so brutal, so perfectly calibrated to create evolution that attempting to recreate you would destroy anyone who tried. To understand your psychological foundation. He spent 3 days studying your behavioral patterns, your choice architecture, your relationship with suffering, came back looking exhausted, said your subject has what ancient texts call sovereign consciousness, said they've achieved a level of self-ownership that most people spend lifetimes pursuing and never reach, said they've died and resurrected so many times internally that they no longer fear endings, no longer fear beginnings, no longer fear the space between. They exist in a state of perpetual present awareness that allows them to act without regret, because they're not carrying the weight of past mistakes or the anxiety of future consequences. They're just here now, making the next move, and the next move, and the next move, with complete acceptance of whatever outcome manifests. He said this isn't something you can teach in a 6-week program. This is something that emerges from walking through your personal underworld and choosing to stay conscious through the entire journey. Most people dissociate during their darkest moments. Most people fragment and repress and avoid. Your subject stayed awake through hell, and that's what forged them into something unbreakable. You'd have to deliberately traumatize your agents and hope they process it correctly, and even then there's no guarantee. So no, I can't help you replicate this. No one can. By week 8, there were 7 agents left, 7 people hanging on by sheer stubbornness. And the program administrators finally had to face reality, had to accept that your mind isn't a formula they can copy, isn't a technique they can distribute, isn't a resource they can exploit. You're not a tool they can mass produce. You're a phenomenon that emerged from circumstances so specific, so brutal, so perfectly calibrated to create evolution that attempting to recreate you would destroy anyone who tried.